Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in our panel discussion today in this series with clerks and secretary generals of parliament about artificial intelligence applied to parliamentary operations. This is the fourth session that we are hosting, and it's an honor to welcome Mr. Jonathan Ruckert, the CEO from NovaWorks in Australia, Ms. Ruth the Secretary General from the National Assemblee of Suriname, and Mr. Sumariyandono from the Deputy Secretary General from the House of Representatives in Indonesia. And myself, as you know, I am Luís, the Executive Director of Bússola Tech, and it's an honor for us to welcome all of you. I have crafted a few questions to each one of you for us to have this discussion. I will ask each one of you a question, and after the first answer, I will ask all of you to share your comments and your insights about these different topics. But before we start, I'd like to first invite each one of you to introduce yourself in 1 minute. I'll do this alphabetically if you allow me. So, Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself in 1 minute?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Jonathan from NovaWorks. I'm the founder and CEO. We've been working with parliaments all around the world for the last 17 to 20 years now, and really helping with their digitization processes, and also now really about tackling artificial intelligence and what are the impacts, you know, specifically for parliamentary process as well. So we're doing a lot of work and looking at doing, you know, different advice, and we're doing a lot of work around that area.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your introduction. Ruth, would you like to introduce yourself to us and to the colleagues?
Yes, thank you. Yes, my name is Ruth. I am the Secretary General of the National Assemblee of Suriname, and I've been since 1998. I've been working in the National Assembly of Suriname, and from 2014, I've been the Secretary General of the Parliament. I started as a library worker in the Parliament, and then as a worker at the legal department, and now I'm the boss. I'm the Secretary General of the National Assembly. It's my pleasure to join you, and I want to say also that I have a strong ICT department. They are, I'm very proud of them.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ruth, for your introduction. Mr. Sumariyandono, would you like to introduce yourself to us as well in 1 minute, please? I think you're muted, sir. Mr. Dono, I think you're muted.
Okay, now it's okay. Can you hear? Okay, thank you. Okay, hello everyone. I would like to sign my appreciation to Bússola Tech, of course, for the hosting this forum, and also our distinguished panelists, Ms. Ruth. Hi, good to see you, and also for the Mr. Jonathan. Yes, Mr. Jonathan from the NovaWorks, Australia. And of course, to all of our participants for this session. My name is Sumariyandono. I'm currently the Deputy of Administration for Secretariat General of the House of the Representative of the Republic of Indonesia. My office oversees and coordinates various units from budgeting, procurement, human resources, organization and planning, parliamentary facility, and this include also for our information technology center. As a deputy of administration, my role is also to monitor and support the digital transformation implementation in the Parliament, especially, including the extending engagement through the platforms such as the Association of the Secretary General of Parliament, Interparliamentary Union, and national government, regional, and also international stakeholder. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Dono, for your introduction as well. It's a pleasure for us to welcome you here, sir. I'd like to open this panel discussion about the future of parliamentary operations with AI-enhanced legislative services, the challenges and the priorities. With my first question to you, Jonathan. As Parliament and legislatures explore the integration of artificial intelligence technologies to streamline and enhance their operation, in your view, which initial AI applications are deemed most accessible and promising for immediate adoption? In popular terms, what are the low-hanging fruits, in your opinion, for parliaments in their AI adoption? And additionally, what are your views on the use of AI in parliamentary business processes and technology? And finally, what are the downstream effects do you think AI could provide in terms of functionality and responsiveness of the institution? Please, Jonathan, feel free to use the floor. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. It's quite a long question, but I think we'll try to break it down into those 3 particular areas to start off with. So we've been incorporating artificial intelligence now within our own solution probably for the last year or 2 now, and some of the areas that we first targeted for parliaments to actually start to actually use were use cases such as moderation. So that's really about flagging of content, that may be offensive, as an example, or may need to be reviewed, as an example. So that we've used in the past where a citizen-facing service, as an example. So when citizens are actually interacting, we can use moderation very easily and very quickly to flag specific content either way. So that's really quite a novel use and a very simple use of artificial intelligence to review content as well. One of the sort of other ones which we have been working with quite recently as well is summarization. So document summarization is actually really important. We find, especially because of the amount of data that parliamentarians actually consume. So with the large amounts of data that they might be consuming, there might be legislation, there might be bills, there might be, committee correspondence, there might be a whole range of different artifacts. And what we find is sometimes those artifacts can be, hundreds, a couple of 100 pages long. So it can be really quite hard to digest in a meaningful time to actually help, understand what the intent and the content of that document is. So we use things like intent or content, around those sort of things, or extracting keywords and automation around that to really drive document summarization, to compress, say, for example, a 100-page document into, say, a summary which may be 4 or 5 executive pages long. So that one we find quite powerful to actually understand why when you're actually consuming a lot of data or a lot of content, to actually really focus to deliver that as a supplementary service. And I use the word supplementary there because with all these discussions, we don't want to use the word replace. Artificial intelligence here is not here to replace the original content. The original content that we're talking about is the master copy, and everyone needs access to those master copies. So what we have to then do is really ensure that we're citating and we're actually then referencing that information in a meaningful manner. So we have to be careful, sometimes with using artificial intelligence, that we don't lose the intent as well. So especially when dealing with, say, for example, legislation or along those lines, we need to make sure that we are, appropriately managing that content as well while we're generating it. So one of the things we need to really consider is making sure that we're not changing the intent by using artificial intelligence when using some of this technology as well. Another really good use case of artificial intelligence, and it's probably being used quite significantly at the moment, is really automated translation services. So we're using, here is our existing content, and we want to translate that through to another language to really enhance the citizen-facing services as well. Or even if, for example, you may have a parliament which has multiple dialects and multiple different languages as well. So making sure that we can actually have meaningful conversations in the native language as well. So artificial intelligence is really starting to come along, especially with dealing with different languages now, say where it was, say, 12 months ago or 24 months ago as well. If we looked at back in the history, it was very much, focused around English, focused around, just that as a model. But now what we're finding is there's a lot more movement and there's a lot more openness to actually then translate or to actually make those models and make specific models for other languages as well. Because, for example, we were working in French the other day, and the way which they are using, their verbs, or they're using all these sort of other things, is very different to how you would say pronounce or you structure your language in English, as an example. So we've got to be very mindful and conscious of using the model which is actually going to be most consistent for your language being used as well. And sort of an adjunct to what we're looking at with the document summarization, simplification of language is another newer trend as well, which we're finding really, really useful in that sort of regard. So when you have very much structured content in a very legal sense from a parliament, a really good sort of novel use is really to provide for the citizens a more simplified version of that. So we can target, the younger generation who may not be legally, up to the standard, which may be how you're producing that content. And it might also be, other people as well who, don't really want to understand the legal language as well. They want to move into those sort of normal language as well. So there are really quite a few novel uses. And, those are sort of four which we see as being actively worked on as we speak.
I want to thank you for the occasion, and the functionality and the responsiveness of my institution. One, AE-powered transcriptions tools can be accurately convert spoken words into text in real time, facilitating the transcription of parliamentary debates and sessions. This can significantly reduce the time and effort required for manual transcription. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding to cybersecurity and threat detection, AE-powered cybersecurity solutions can detect and mitigate potential cyber threats targeting parliamentary systems and networks. These solutions can provide continuous monitoring, threat analysis, and incident response capabilities to safeguard sensitive information. Regarding to efficiency, I'm sorry, our native tongue is Dutch. We speak English, but our native tongue is Dutch. I think Vijay told you about our language. Yes, thank you. EA can streamline various administrative tasks such as scheduling, document management, and data analysis, making parliamentary processes more efficient. And accessibility, AA-powered tools can enhance accessibility for citizens by providing easier access to parliamentary information and facilitating public engagement. Automation, AI can automate tasks, freeing up human resources to focus on more strategic activities and policy making. By analyzing historical data, AI can predict future trends, risks, and opportunities with greater accuracy. Institutions can use these insights to make informed decisions, mitigate risks, and capitalize on emerging opportunities. And regarding to enhance decision making, AI-powered analytics can provide decision makers with actionable insights in real time, enabling them to make data-driven decisions more quickly and effectively. This can lead to better strategic planning and operational management. By adopting these initial AI applications, Parliament can enhance efficiency, transparency, and accessibility in their operation, while also laying the foundation for further AI integration in the future. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ruth, for your consideration.
It's clear.
Absolutely, it's perfectly clear. Your English is much better than my Dutch, which I don't speak, sadly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interrupt with technologies change. I would like to start on the second question first on our view of the AI in the parliamentary business process and technology. Our parliament is always open to the new innovation, product, and idea, especially regarding the ICT. We all aim to harness new tools and technology development, and that could support the work of the parliamentary business to be more efficient, effective, and most importantly, serve our MPs and their constituents. However, at the moment, there are still existing gap of understanding the use of new technology in the political and parliamentary process in our institution. Many of our MPs, official, and staff still distrust the use of the technology, especially in regard to the security issues and independency of for our infrastructure and service. As a parliament with the dynamic political process, there are many strict measures to process legislation that are difficult to reform even with the digitalization. Thus, the issue of the AI would also be overlooked and often comes as a threat to the political process in the parliament. As for the first question, we believe that the most promising area where AI could be implemented in our process and service come mostly from the non-generative side of the AI, which focus on supporting analysis and processing information. This include AI-powered chat box for public complaint and participation, legal analysis for the public complaint and aspiration, which include regulation classification, analysis, and recommendation for completion. Transcription, production, and process is also one of the included here. OCR technology for our legal unit and archive. That is for the first question and the second question. On the third question that you raised, we believe that AI could help us manage the classification and the analysis of the high volume of complaint and aspiration from the public. We also intrigued to explore potential for the AI to help analyze and synchronize the many regulations that could support resolution for our constituent. We acknowledge that AI have a significant potential to the legislative drafting mechanism of the create of a more efficient and accountable legislative process. When integrated and properly trained, AI could be a powerful tool to help reduce technical mistake in legislation. Also accelerate administrative process and support legislation analysis and cross-referencing, and also monitor the decision-making process become as a black box of legislation. That's all I think. Is that clear?
Perfectly clear, sir. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you.
And I will ask you to answer my second question, which is, all of you touched in different possible applications of artificial intelligence, but one thing that's crucial for artificial intelligence, even more so in Parliament, is the human element, the people. And my question to you, Mr. Dono, if you can start, how are you training the people in the Parliament to use and to make the most of these technologies? And by people, I mean the staff that's working for the institution, the members of Parliament. How are you bringing this new technology to them so they can make the most of it?
A transition of our staff. Yeah, we have recently made a major decision to implement the use of the Microsoft Office 365 to support our internal administrative and technical operation in the Parliament. We are hoping to have a more integrated and dynamic workflow. We just recently conducted a series of training and module for our staff this week. As you maybe know, Microsoft have integrated AI on some of its features, including chatbot, writing assistant, and translation. And we are hoping this type of the exposure will familiar staff with the AI feature of an application. Our second strategy is also conducting some piloting project, which focus on one specific service. In this case of the AI power chatbot via WhatsApp number, and also legal analysis for complaint through a small team from various units in the Parliament. This piloting project will help us determine the viability of policies and changes that we make and any new innovation and technology. One of the major fears of AI is that they will replace many our workplace by making organization more effective and efficient. But we do have to realize that in the Parliament, we can never decrease the human aspect of our work. From survey we have conducted in various platforms, the public and our constituents still prefer directly in-person engagement compared to using online platform. They prefer to send us mail rather than e-form. One of the best way to move with this progress and reform is to continue in upskilling our staff and increasing the ICT capacities. This way, we also hope to create more innovators and policy makes within the Parliament, decreasing dependency of out-of-sourcing consultant and companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dono, for your considerations. Ms. Ruth, would you like to share your considerations on this topic as well?
Yes, thank you, Luís. Saying that regarding to training programs, that Parliament institution are implementing comprehensive training programs to equip staff with the necessary skills to work with AI technologies. These programs cover a range of topics, including understanding AI, data literacy, software proficiency, and ethical considerations. Change management. Effective change management strategies are being employed to manage the transition smoothly. This involves communication, stakeholder engagement, and providing support to staff members as they adapt to new technologies and workflows. Regarding to consultation and collaboration, engaging with staff members throughout the process of implementing AI technologies is crucial. Parliaments are consulting with employees to understand their concerns and perspectives, as well as soliciting feedback on how AI can best be integrated into their workflow. Collaboration between IT specialists, policymakers, and frontline staff helps ensure that AI solutions are tailored to meet the specific needs of the parliamentary environment.
Thank you, ma'am, for your considerations around this topic. Jonathan, I'd like to invite you to close this round. I know that you don't work in the parliament, but you are working with several parliaments in transition them with AI-powered services, for example, New Zealand, Australia, and many others. So can you share a little bit on your perspective on how parliament transitioned their staff to be able to use these technologies?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think, so change management is probably one of the biggest areas of consideration. So everyone who we've sort of spoken with, you know, people are worried about the use of artificial intelligence to make their job redundant, as an example. So if you look at the traditional use case of Hansard, there's a lot of fear in terms of the impact to Hansard, as an example, where you're automatically using automated speech to text, you know, to actually start to generate some of their transcripts as well. And, you know, when you speak to, say, for example, Hansard staff, they're worried about what is the impact to them. So change management is really important when we're dealing with the concepts of artificial intelligence. And one of the biggest things I always come to when we look at the change management side is that we're really trying to make sure that the staff are focused on high-value tasks, not the low-value tasks, which they may be doing right now, or repetitive tasks, which don't really add value to the process, but it takes a lot of time and effort to do repetitive tasks. So that's where we see the real big value in terms of the use of artificial intelligence, and then how we actually use that from a change management perspective as well. So realistically, what we tend to work on and focus on is really the change management aspects within parliaments, to really understand what are the ethical obligations that, you know, the parliament actually has. As an example, you know, what are the guidelines for the responsible use of artificial intelligence? So what is your transparency looking like? Is it going to be a fair process? So fairness could also be, you know, from a citizen point of view, but also an employee point of view as well. Accountability and bias mitigation as well. So like accountability with the use of artificial intelligence is really important from a parliamentary perspective. You know, I sort of keep on referring back to, you know, parliaments are built on trust, you know, transparency and accountability. So whatever we use within the parliamentary process, whether that be technology, whether that be process, whether that be, you know, any part of the actual the business itself, we need to make sure that we're adhering to those three pillars around trust, transparency, and accountability as well. So we need to look at ourselves and say, well, how are we actually using artificial intelligence in a meaningful manner to make sure that we are compliant with those sort of principles as well, and whatever, you know, whatever other principles you actually need to actually then adhere to needs to make sure that you're transparent with both the public, but also your own staff and members, etc., on how you're actually using artificial intelligence too, because that will develop trust. If you develop trust, you can then actually develop change, and meaningful change, because, you know, people are using it within the parliamentary context already. They want to use, for example, ChatGPT, or they want to use other sort of scenarios to help them with their business. So it'll be used right now within the parliamentary context. And what we need to do as an organization is really, you know, make sure that it's a managed component, to make sure that we're not accidentally distributing information to public models, as an example, and we're grounding your data to your own model as well. So change management becomes really, really important, because if you get your staff's buy-in in terms of what your policy procedure is, what your strategy is, then they can understand, well, okay, I'm not going to go off and do my own thing, or I'm not going to feel threatened by the implementation of this, because it's actually going to help me with my job, instead of me doing all these mundane, repetitive tasks which take up significant amounts of time. So that's sort of like where my viewpoint is coming from, Luís. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your considerations about this topic. Ms. Ruth, I'd like to bring my next question to you, and it's the question is very simple. The answer, I don't think it is, which is, what are the main administrative and procedural challenges to use these technologies in the parliamentary procedure? We know parliaments are very traditional, are consensus building institutions. Sometimes it can be very challenging to change even minor things. So what are the main challenges you see from both the administration side, but also from the procedural legislative process point of view?
I think for me, the first one is security, the security risk. The security risk, I think in the AI technologies used in yes, they can be vulnerable to security threats. I think AI can be vulnerable to security risk, hacking, manipulations, and manipulation of data, and also yes, I think that yes, and safeguarding against these risks requires robust cybersecurity and cybersecurity measures, which can add complexity to implementation efforts. I think also things like for these things you need a lot of money, I think, and that's one of my main concerns. Also, complexity of legislative procedures. The process are often intricate and involve numerous stages, from drafting bills to passing laws. Integrating AI into these processes requires ensuring compatibility with existing procedures, which can be challenging due to their complexity. And the third one, regulatory hurdles. The frameworks confirming the use of AI in legislative processes may be lacking or outdated. Clear guidelines and regulation are needed to ensure compliance with legal requirements and ethical standards. But my main concern is the first one, the security risk.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth, for your considerations. Mr. Dono, would you like to share your considerations around this topic as well?
Yes, I think the main barriers I said is of many reform we see this, including the AI, is stem from that what I have mentioned in the first round. I think the gap and the lack of political will, which eventually influence the commitment of high level and working level official. This also impact the budget that are invested in the tools and programs, and we also need to consider about the capacity of human resources navigating this transition, especially. It is quite difficult to create change on an institution that already has a specific mandate and expectation of their staff, especially in heavily administrative institution like our parliament. And any transition and changes will be an additional burden and responsibility that might be burden and responsibility that might not be able to commit. And adding budget and staffing for this procurement, we also need extensive research, justification, and a certain level of urgency. Another important issue to note is to bridge multiple stakeholders that come from various backgrounds. Communicating technical terms from programmer to government official who work in the policies and administration can become hankering of mismatched expectation, especially on issues such as the artificial intelligence transparency. Another concern is about the openness, participative, responsible policymaking is a must in developing this type of reform. That's all.
Thank you, sir, for your considerations around this topic. Jonathan, would you like to share your thoughts and close this round?
Yeah, for sure. So when we look at the procedural administrative barriers hindering the smooth incorporation of AI technology, like we have to really, I think, take it back to understanding what we're looking at procuring. So like what are the actual use cases that we're actually trying to achieve with artificial intelligence? And I think what I've seen in the industry with some vendors at the moment is that they are spruiking artificial intelligence for anything. So if you go to some of the vendors out there, and if you sort of say, oh yeah, we're looking at artificial intelligence, they will sell you Chat GPT, and is it actually going to be fit for purpose for the use within artificial intelligence, within a parliament, I think is really, really important to actually analyze upfront. So I think it's really about understanding, and I think this is probably where some of the risks are in terms of really about the understanding of how does a particular artificial intelligence application apply to a parliamentary process? And, is it trying to do things, as Ruth was saying around security or other things along those lines, which you may not understand at that stage. So some of the biggest barriers we're seeing are definitely of a lack of understanding in terms of what are the implications and what are the pitfalls, or how are things being used within the artificial intelligence application with your data as well. So that comes back down to security. So I think it's understanding you have, say, your sessional orders or your standing orders, or you have your resolutions, etc., and making sure that you're compliant with your policy, your procedure, your ethical obligations, making sure that you've thought about all of those sort of processes even before you get to the technology stage, I think is really important. So the biggest sort of barriers that we see is really some of those traditional processes trying to get up to speed with those newer technologies and the newer growth in technology as well. But also then trying to keep current with the advancements in this technology. And we've touched previously before in other panels where the growth and the speed of change with this technology is very, very large. So it's going through a massive growth phase at the moment. So the Parliament then has to also adopt a change process around quickly updating, their own legislation, their own requirements based on where things are actually heading in the industry as well. So it's quite a challenge when you look at some of those nuances. Instead of say we set this legislation and then we may not review that for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, you've got to be reviewing that consistently with what is actually occurring in this world. Like if you look at, for example, what's happened around the world, where you've now got the EU who are legislating around what the use of artificial intelligence looks like. We had the case where Italy banned Chat GPT outright. They just said, listen, we're not having it until we understand it. So, there's a lot of, I suppose, implications where, you need to understand really what you were trying to actually use and get that into a facility that a parliament can actually understand and manage its risk to, again, maintain trust, transparency, and accountability.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your considerations. And allow me to get this thread that you brought about the risks and the threat, and even the misconceptions that parliaments should be aware when implementing or developing an AI for their institution. So, what are these impending risks and threats that you see? You mentioned some of them, but if you can deep dive on that.
Yeah.
And secondly, what are the strategies to mitigate and overcome these risks and gaps?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when we look at anything to do with artificial intelligence, the first thing I look at is data and how your data is being used. Like that's one of the first things that I'm interested in understanding. And when you look at, say, a lot of the publicly available commercial offerings out there which are heavily reliant on, say, the ChatGPT or Google Bard or like other what I call global models. They don't realize that if you're using parliamentary data in that context, you're sharing your data with all these other customers. So if you have sensitive information that you're incorporating into a public commercial model, you're facilitating a leaking of information into the public domain. So that's one of the risks which I think has to be very heavily considered, and understanding what happens to your data when you use artificial intelligence, and who can then benefit from that data as well. So the way which we tend to look at it from a data perspective is what we call data grounding. And data grounding is a concept where you can leverage the large language models which are out there as an example, but your data is still kept in its own silo. So, and there are actually examples of that. I think we were talking with the US House of Congress, and they actually negotiated with, I think, ChatGPT as an example, where they actually have it in a contract in writing that, they have their own isolated instance where none of their data will ever leave that particular instance, if that makes sense. So there are options available to you, but there's other options on top of that as well, to guarantee that your data is not going to be leaked into other environments too, or other customers, which I think is really important. So I think whenever somebody approaches you to say that, oh, we can put artificial intelligence in, you need to understand, like, what is their model? What is their data usage going to be like? And what are they going to be doing with your information? I think is really, really important. Understand, what the model is and what the actual configuration is as well around that. How is it coming to these sort of conclusions? So if you're using it as document summarization, you don't want it to be fed false information. So I sort of I put together a presentation about a month or two ago, which is accessible via Bússola Tech as well. But there are quite a few different risks, that we need to sort of consider. One of them is what we call generative AI hallucinations. And what that is a AI system wants to help you, right? And it is trained to help you. So it actually may generate information that is not accurate or factually correct. And you can see this in the large commercial models, which is why I don't recommend using those. I recommend, leveraging, say, an open source model as an example, and then feeding your data in an isolated instance into those large language models in an isolation environment. And when we're sort of, again, coming back down to trust, transparency, and accountability, we need to also trust the AI system that it's going to be factual. It's going to be accurate, and we need to make sure that it's providing citations to source content as well. So you can check it, you can fact check, and you can make sure that it is all correct as well. So that's one of the biggest ones which we find, is making sure that the data which it's actually generating is factually correct, is really, really important to have a risk mitigation, security mitigation perspective around that. The other sort of thing, which is something which may not be considered a lot of the time, is there's also the ability to poison the model as well. And we can actually manipulate the artificial intelligence model's training data to learn content which it shouldn't have to learn or should not learn as well. So there are various sort of threat landscapes. Again, you do this probably with your network at the moment. You do it with your standard security models within Parliament and your cybersecurity models as well. It's really about learning how to adapt those processes which you have now from a cybersecurity perspective into the AI landscape, which I think is really important. So, if you, again, are reliant on the integrity of that information, you need to make sure that the training data which is going into that model is factually correct, and nobody else from an external point of view is then trying to inject data to then say sway a particular opinion or, you know, introduce bias against a minority as an example. So that's another security aspect which people don't necessarily think about when they're actually dealing with artificial intelligence too. You know, I think, you know, part of our risk mitigation is international collaboration. Like what we're doing today, we're discussing the pitfalls, the understanding of things, you know, understanding how different parliaments or different organizations are using AI, what they're doing to manage their own risks for cybersecurity, what their concerns are, and how we can actually help and manage those risks as well. So international collaboration, I think, is really, really important with people who understand the parliamentary context and the technology side, and then bridge that all together.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the very comprehensive answer. If that's okay with you, it would be great if you can send the presentation to the colleagues here on the panel. Afterwards, I can create an email so you can send the presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Dono, would you like to comment on what Jonathan just said and on this topic as well?
Yeah, I believe our concern is that many might this might not understand what AI is, and might perceive it as a one-stop solution to any problems they have in organization. This was the case on our digital transformation and e-gov policies, where the ministry developed too many application and big data program without understanding how it works, what is needed, and if it is needed to solve a certain problem in their unit and agencies. Which is why dialogue and forum such as this one is important to exchange the many issues we face right now and we may face in the future in regard to AI. It is important to proliferate discussion and experience to better understand, not only for our staff and secretariat, but also to our MPs and the public. We believe that despite the many opinions that we have on this issue, AI has become a disruption that is here to stay. We are optimistic to be able to adapt the AI development, but we also need to proceed with a caution. If we want to adapt with the AI, Parliament must have strong policies on data, including data privacy, security, transparency, and ethics. We must have a strong and organized business process along with the capable, of course, with the personal resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dono, for your considerations. Ms. Ruth, would you like to share your considerations on this question as well?
Thank you. Thank you, Luís. Implementing and developing AI in parliamentary institutions can offer many benefits, but it also comes with its own set of risks, threats, as the other panelists mentions, and misconceptions. One of those, transparency and accountability. Lack of transparency in algorithms and decision-making within parliamentary institutions. The strategy advocate for transparency standards and regulations in AI development and deployment, ensure that AI systems are explainable, allowing for scrutiny and accountability. The second risk, cybersecurity risk. AI systems can be vulnerable to cyber attacks, posing risks to sensitive parliamentary data and operation. The strategy, strengthen cybersecurity measures, including encryptions, access control, and regular security audits. Provide cyber security training to staff to increase awareness of potential threats, as my colleague from Indonesia mentioned. The third one, misconceptions and public perceptions, misunderstanding about AI capabilities and limitation can hinder acceptance and adoption. The strategy here promotes AI literacy and education among parliamentarians, staff, and the public also. Engage in transparent communication about the intended uses and limitation of AI within parliamentary institutions. Yes, thank you, Luís.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth, for your considerations around this topic. Now, I'd like to move to our final question of the day, which is to understand your vision for the future with these new technologies. And I'm not saying the future like next year, but looking ahead 5 years, how do you envision the role of artificial intelligence in shaping the next generation of legislative services and operations? And specifically, what strategic initiatives are being considered for AI in enhancing parliamentary functions and introducing innovative practices that could redefine the legislative process, not today, but in the future, in 5-10 years, looking to the future? Ms. Ruth, would you like to start with your considerations?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. In 5 years, it's not long. Predicting exact initiative of or strategies that parliaments might adopt in the future is speculative, as technological advancements, social norms, and political will. Political will, I repeat, political will. However, based on current trends and discussion in the realm of AI, and directions can be outlined. The first one, do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. The first one, AI for data and analysis and decision making. Parliaments may increasingly use AI tools for processing large volumes of legislative data, analyzing public opinion, and predicting the impact of proposed policies. This could involve sentiment analysis of public feedback on proposed bills, automated summarization of complex documents, and the data-driven insights to inform decision-making processes. The second one, collaboration with AI research institutions and industry. Parliaments may collaborate with AI research institutions and industry partners to develop customized AI solutions tailored to the specific needs and challenges of legislative services. This could involve joint research projects
Miss Ruth, I think we lost
I'm
you when
sorry.
you were saying
Yes.
about joint projects, and then
Yes.
I think
I'm
if you
sorry.
can restart from there, from the joint project that you're mentioning.
Yes, the joint internet was a little bit low here. Yes, this could involve joint research projects, knowledge sharing initiatives, and technology transfer programs. The third one, AI ethics and conference frameworks. Parliaments may establish regularity, frameworks, and ethical guidelines for the responsible use of AI in legislative processes, ensuring transparency, accountability, and fairness. This could involve mechanism for auditing AI systems, addressing biases, and safeguarding privacy rights. Yes.
Thank you, man, for your considerations. Mr. Dono, would you like to share your considerations on this question as well?
Okay, thank you, Luis. I think AI will have significant impacts to our parliament if there are many MPs who champion it, especially among your youth MPs and high-level officials. In our previous election, AI generate image and AI algorithm in social media have created great impact to electability, campaign process, media, information, and election result. And this will potentially run off to the parliament, as many politicians will be more open to innovation and creative programs. In our parliament, we are open to any new innovation that could help support the work of our MPs in fulfilling their duty of legislation, representation, and also the budgeting. One of current project is legal analysis for public complaint and aspiration by our legal bureau. This analysis will integrate the use of AI and use to cross-reference, analyze, classify, and identify if there is any overlapping regulation in the public complaints and aspiration. So since public complaint in Indonesia can sometimes be quite complex and high volume, one of the examples are land conflict and ownership. So AI could potentially support this type of complaint resolution. And this analysis is also as a reference for MPs in their legislative process. Hopefully, AI could be a catalyst to a more representative and participative legislative process in our parliaments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dono, for your considerations. Jonathan, would you like to share your thoughts around this question and close the panel with your final considerations?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think if we look at the sort of next 5 years and shaping, what are the potential use cases for artificial intelligence, and what would be one of the biggest impacts I can see. I think data, the integration of artificial intelligence with the data which Parliament has, I think, is really quite powerful. And I'll give you an example of why I think that is as well. If we look at legislation as an example, we may have hundreds of thousands of different legislation over, 50, 100 years as an example, and it might be quite significantly more. All the amendments, all of the changes, all of the differences, etc. And at the moment, it takes humans to analyze all of that information to make sure that, well, have we made a mistake in this legislation? Have we made a mistake in, by creating this new clause, does that cancel out that clause? And, all those sort of other real big nuances where data linking between information is done manually at the moment, and without necessarily having to look at, say, 100 years of legislation, and all of that content all the way through, I think is where I see a lot of value in artificial intelligence going forward, because there is a significant amount of data which is within the parliamentary context, and a lot of that is all done manually at the moment. So understanding if you had a bill or a legislation in 1962 against a particular topic as an example, and then that's been changed 20 times over that period of time, it takes quite a long time for somebody to actually work out what those changes were potentially, how they were impacted, what other legislation they've actually impacted, and a whole range of other things as well around that. So I see the use of this to work out what is the change of, if I make this particular wording change, or if I make this change, what is my impact, and it can make those sort of answers available to you for review. And I'll say it that way, not necessarily automatically creating legislation or automatically creating content on your behalf, but it's giving you the power to automatically analyze previous discussions or previous history to make current decisions better now. So, and I think that's probably the real power of AI, where we're using all your data to make better decisions today, but also better decisions in the future. And if we're using it in the correct way, we should be making better decisions in the future. One of the other areas which I think hasn't been explored a lot is also the use of other jurisdictions, other jurisdictional data as well. So when I say that, so for example, everyone dealt with COVID laws differently. Australia, locked down and didn't let anyone in the country, as an example. And so we were making decisions on the fly, making sure we could do this, but, they would have teams of people trying to work out what the rest of the world is doing. Now, if we started to actually consume data from other jurisdictions to understand what worked, what did not work, how can we do something better based on their experience as an example, and feed that into the process, that's quite an interesting concept to actually explore in the future, because a lot of content is still all regional bound. So it's all regional based. So there's the ability, or I think, potentially in the next 5 years, the ability for other people to consume other jurisdictional data, so you can actually have more content to make better decisions in the future.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your answer, your considerations. Sadly, we are reaching the end of our panel discussion. It was an honor for me to be your moderator today. Before we go, I'd like to yield the floor to each one of you for very briefly, 30 seconds to 1 minute, for your final messages. Mr. Dono, would you like to share your final message for this panel today?
Sure. Thank you, Luis. I will say that AI has created a disruption that we have never seen before. As I mentioned before, if we want to adapt this change, we must have a strong foundation for policy data, ethics, and security. Transparency and openness are also key in developing this type of the program and reform within the parliament. There should be no misconception that AI should take away the human process in the parliament. AI should be a tools to help Parliament elevate their work, strengthen the public participation and engagement, and helping to create legislation that accountable and reflective to the public representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dono, for your final message. Ms. Ruth, would you like to share your final message with us in today's panel?
Yes, thank you. I want to say that for the Parliament Suriname, I think it's important that when we work with AI, is that we work transparent, and that we inform the public. We have by inform the public, we can do this by with our website and our television channel. I think that transparency, I repeat it, but I think that is that's very important for us.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth, for your final message. Jonathan, would you like to close the debate with your final message?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the panel colleagues as well. It's been very informative from my perspective to understand the challenges of unique situations which everyone is facing, and some of the security concerns or some of the actual implementations that you're actually looking at as well. And it validates what I've been hearing from a lot of other parliaments as well, where they're concerned about those sort of particular areas when adopting artificial intelligence. So I think, keeping the communication lines open, keeping that all together in terms of knowing that other people are actually going through this as well. So, keeping communication lines open, I think, is probably really important. And if you have any questions, we're here to help as well. So, please feel free to reach out, and more than happy to help along those lines as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Before we go, just two very short messages. I do have one complaint about today's panel, which is it's virtual and not in person, because it would be a pleasure to meet all of you in person and continue this conversation. Hopefully we can do that in the future.